Ascendant and descendant in astrology. What are the angles? So I already made a video about the ascendant and what that means, so you can go back and check that out for a deep dive there. But I thought I should talk about all four of the angles, of which the ascendant is only one, and it is primary, like I talked about, for being the point that represents both body and mind, the place where the totality of the self is sort of symbolized. So that's the point on the eastern horizon. That's the point where planets rise up over the horizon, and the descendant is the western horizon, where planets go down. So that axis represents what is above the earth from your perspective at any given point in time. So anything underneath of the ascendant descendant axis will represent what is beneath the earth or hidden. Conversely, we have the MC, the midheaven, and the IC, which is directly opposite that. So those 2 points represent what is directly overhead at a given point in time, but it's the highest point in the sky. And then the IC would be the lowest point, directly underneath the earth. If you could drill a hole to the other side of the planet, that would be the IC. Symbolically, these points are quite intuitive to understand. The MC represents what is the most visible point in the chart. It is how you are seen in a natal chart. What is your public image, your vocation, career, reputation, the way that you're known in the broader world, how you integrate with society. And the IC represents home. Essentially, this is the axis of career and home, work and home, that duality, that dichotomy. The IC not only represents home and how you are potentially in more private settings, but also the parents. Some would also say the grandparents, sort of like your lineage, your ancestry, what came before you. In addition, sometimes people talk about the IC or the fourth house, which is most often where the IC is found, as representing homeland. It could be your physical home property or the land from which you came. The ascendant descendant axis, on the other hand, represents self, who you are, and the descendant, other, which represents relationships, marriage, partnership, that sort of thing. We have potentially in the seventh house and the descendant, this point represents potentially your marriage partner. It could also represent business partnerships. It's not so much friendship. There's a different place on the chart that represent friendship, but more of those kind of legally, seriously binding relationships. In Hellenistic astrology, these were known as kentron, and so some other potential translations of this word was like a pivot point, or also sort of the same word for prodding, as if a poker for some cattle prodding along. So these points were considered to be very energetic and pivotal in that sense. These are the anchors that give us the structure of the chart: the highest, the lowest, the eastern, the western points. And so if a planet is found on one of these points, it's going to be particularly energetic, important, or active. For instance, if you have any planets that are on the ascendant, the place that represents you and the totality of who you are, that will potentially indicate qualities that are more intrinsic to your nature, personality, who you are, archetypes that you're more likely to embody strongly and bring into the world in that way. Planets that are very close to the ascendant or in the first house are extremely important for that reason. On the other side, we have the descendant, and these planets that could be found on the descendant or close to the descendant in the seventh house, those planets will potentially represent either your actual partner, the type of people or partnership that you are attracted to, qualities that you're attracted to, and or potentially how you show up in relationships and the way that you embody these energies in a relationship. So either the way that you show up in partnership or the actual literal manifestation of your partners and the qualities that you tend to find yourself attracted to. So this is a very interesting axis here, I think, because another way to conceptualize this dichotomy of self and other, individualism and partnership, is that sometimes times the qualities that we find in the seventh house or the place of partnership or just in relationships tend to be qualities that we may have exiled, that we may have decided this is not a quality that I have, so this is something that I seek out in relationship. It's not something that I have, it's something I'm lacking, therefore I need to find it outside of me in the other. This is the nature of duality. So if you're looking at your chart and you're noticing that you do have some of these planets in your seventh house or on the descendant, you might just look into the qualities of those placements and think about the ways that maybe you are seeing that show up in your relationships. Maybe it is something that you feel like is not a quality that you can really own as much, or maybe not as comfortable with, or maybe it's something that you have felt pretty integrated around, or maybe it's something that you used to seek out outside of you but have come to terms with the way that this also exists inside of you. One thing that's really interesting to look at on your chart is to notice this ascendant-descendant axis and notice whether most of your planets are below the surface here or above the surface here. So what is above this axis, that would be what is overhead at that given point in time, versus what is underneath the bottom half of that circle, underneath the ascendant-descendant axis, what is hidden at that time. Oftentimes people who have lots of planets and most of their things going on in the upper half of the chart tend to be more extroverted people, and people with placements more so in the bottom half of the chart tend to be potentially more introverted. This is also related to house placement. The chart is divided into 12 places, which are both zodiac signs and then houses. In Hellenistic astrology, we see each zodiac sign to be equal size to each house, and they just map on top of each other like that. There are different house systems that astrologers fight over that have different sized houses and different rotations, but in any case, generally, the first 6 houses are under the ascendant-descendant axis, and these are the places that have to do with the self and more private parts of life. So the second house is personal finances, the third house is neighbors and siblings, the fourth house is home, parents, family, the fifth house is creativity, the sixth house is health and injury type of things. Then the seventh house is the other. So from 7 to 12 is more kind of self with society and topics or different areas of life that have to do with how you integrate with the broader world. So starting with the 7th house being the literal other, partnership, marriage, etc. 8th house being other people's money. 9th house being religion, education, and these sort of cultural institutions, justice systems, things like that. The 10th house, career. The 11th house, friends, groups, alliances that you're a part of. And the 12th house being spirituality, mental illness, self-undoing, imprisonment, and things like that. So when there's more constellated in the top half of the chart, people tend to just have more of themselves integrated into society and their relationships to the external world, whereas people with more constellated in the bottom half of the chart tend to be a little bit more introverted and have the different aspects of themselves constellated in these more private places that are sort of more intimate. On the other axis, the MC, the IC, we have planets on the MC, on the midheaven at the top of the chart. The MC and the ascendant, these two are the most important points in the chart, the most important angles, the most prominent. All 4 of these places are very important, but they rank these angles as most important being the ascendant, the midheaven, most important, and then comes the descendant, and then lastly the IC in terms of what is sort of the most important pivotal aspects of life that people tend to focus on. So the MC, planets here, very powerful position. Characteristics that you really radiate into the world, in your vocation, in how you show up at work, and what you become known for. The sun is sort of the light that you shine into the world and the way people see you, but the MC is more of how you become known more broadly in your reputation and in your career. So planets here will sometimes indicate directions that your career might be geared towards, types of roles that you find yourself in work, or the way that you show up in the workplace, the sort of persona that you have at work. And depending on if it's benefic or malefic, it might also indicate whether you experience more good fortune or challenges in work. There's many different ways that you can interpret this point, but I find the MC to be extremely interesting as indicating a direction of profession. I just think that profession is very interesting. On the other side, we have the IC, which which again represents parents, lineage, home. Planets that are at the bottom of the chart tend to be much more private, things that you don't necessarily see or know or recognize about someone. This is the most hidden point, the most private point, the bottom of the chart. It's the furthest from what is visible and the furthest away from what will become visible in a literal astronomical sense. Planets here can sometimes be more how you show up at home in private settings, may also be qualities that you've inherited more so from your parents, or qualities that are sort of the lineage that you're inheriting, maybe archetypal energies that your ancestral patterning is more connected to in some way. If you liked this video and would like to be notified when I put out more, please subscribe to my channel. Liking and sharing and subscribing really goes a long way towards helping me to reach more people and grow. Of course, leave a comment if you have any questions or thoughts. I do reply to all the comments, and I offer birth chart consultations and timing consultations as an astrologer if you are interested in having me analyze your specific life story, chart, and chronology. I would love to talk to you. Let me know.